Okay. So Laura is a founding member of Neighbours for Palestine, Waterloo region. She's traveled throughout the West Bank and Gaza in 2008 with the Sabeel International Youth Conference. And in 2009, she attended the Gaza Freedom March in Cairo and visited justice organizations in Palestine. She's been a long term advocate, educator, and organizer for justice for Palestine. And we're so excited to have you with us today. With that, I'll hand it over to Laura.
Thank you so much for that introduction and the land acknowledgement. I'm so grateful to be here to talk about my time in Palestine. But before I begin, I really want to recognize that there might be Palestinians or others in this call right now that have more personal experience and knowledge of Palestine than I do. And I'm here to share my own experiences. I'm not here to speak for anyone, and I'm obviously not here to speak for Palestinians. As a non-Palestinian and as a white settler, it's really important that I recognize and acknowledge the immense privilege I've had to even be able to visit Palestine when so many Palestinians are not even allowed to visit their homeland. So I just wanted to share that before I speak about my experiences. So as Margila mentioned in the introduction, I traveled throughout Gaza and the West Bank in 2008. Then in 2009, I attended the Gaza Freedom March in Cairo with over 1,500 people. We were going to try and break the siege on Gaza and bring in humanitarian aid at that time. But unfortunately, Egypt, due to pressure from Israel, wouldn't let us into Gaza. So then I traveled throughout the West Bank with my friend Hannah Marie. She is a local photographer, and many of the photos that I will be sharing today are taken by her. So Hannah and I were both sent there by our church so we could bear witness to what was happening and return home to educate congregations about what we witnessed. I've spoken for 15 years on and off in churches and universities at protests across Canada because once you go there and see the injustice, it is impossible to not speak up. Witnessing daily life under occupation was infuriating and heartbreaking, yet the people that I met showcased unwavering resistance, dignity, and resilience each day. Palestinian novelist and poet Hiba Abu perfectly in October when she wrote about her own experiences in Gaza. This is her poem. She says, "We find ourselves in an indescribable state of bliss amidst the chaos. Amidst the ruins, a new city emerges, a testament to our resilience. Cries of pain echo through the air, mingling with the blood-stained garments of doctors. Teachers, despite their grievances, embrace their pupils, while families display unwavering strength in the face of adversity." So of course, I'm going to talk about the realities in Gaza today. But before I do that, I wanted to share a little bit about the history of the land and also share some personal experiences from when I was there. So we'll just start with a quick look at the recent history of the land. So as you can see, between 1947 and the 2000s, the landscape has changed drastically. The first map shows Palestine in 1947, and then with the creation of the State of Israel in 1948, Palestinians were ethnically cleansed from their land through violent displacement. And so this is called, you probably know, this is called the Nakba, or the catastrophe in English. So between 1947 and 1949, 530 villages were destroyed, 15,000 Palestinians were killed, 750,000 Palestinians were forcefully displaced. Many of the survivors of the Nakba recall that they fled in such a hurry that they left hot food on the table, grabbed what they could, and took their house keys, eventually planning to return. And so what we are seeing in Gaza today is not new. Israel has been ethnically cleansing and overtaking more and more land each year since its creation. So Hannah took this photo, and this shows one of the 530 destroyed Palestinian villages that we witnessed. I don't know if you can see, but behind on the top of the hill is an illegal Israeli settlement in the West Bank. And then you can also see in the back, there's a separation barrier or apartheid wall. And this was a very common sight that I would see throughout the West Bank. You would often see these settlements on the tops of the hills, overtaking the Palestinian land. And so this is just one example of the erasure and displacement of Palestinians from their land. If we look on the last map on the right-hand side, you can see the land remaining as Palestinian territory is only 22% of what it once was, with the Gaza Strip on the left-hand side and then the West Bank on the right. The West Bank's actually often referred to as a Swiss cheese state because of how these illegal Israeli settlements have encroached on Palestinian territory, creating holes throughout it. And so the forceful removal of Palestinians from their homes continues today since the Nakba. While we were in East Jerusalem, Hannah and I met a family who shared their story with us. So this is the family. In the middle of the night, the Israeli army forcefully removed them from their home and moved in an Israeli family before the morning. And unfortunately, it was such a traumatic event for the family. The father of the family experienced a heart attack and passed away that same night. So as a form of resistance, the family set up camp on this plot of land close to their home that was stolen. The tent had been removed by the Israeli army many, many times before. And in fact, when we drove by this area the next day, the tent had once again been torn down and the family displaced. So these illegal house demolitions happen on a regular basis in East Jerusalem and throughout the West Bank. Palestinian families are given very little notice, sometimes 20, 30 minutes, and their home and everything inside it is demolished or taken over. And so I did some volunteer work and I met with the Israeli Committee Against House Demolitions, which is founded by Jeff Halper. Some of you may have heard him speak in Kitchener a few months ago. They do amazing work to document these house demolitions and to support the families and rebuild homes as an act of political resistance. And so when I traveled there were a few different things that really struck me because there's so many aspects of the Israeli occupation that make daily life in Palestine extremely, extremely difficult. So the ones that struck me were the separation wall, checkpoints, and the blatant segregation that I witnessed. So when I first saw the wall, the separation wall, the illegal separation wall, I really was shocked at how massive and imposing it was. It's often described as a form of racial segregation and an apartheid wall. And so this wall cuts through villages, it separates farmers from their land, it separates people from their workplaces, businesses, schools, hospitals, making life extremely, extremely difficult. There was one day that I volunteered with a farmer, helping him with his olive grove because it was extremely difficult for him to get to his own farmland during harvest time because of the wall. So these Israeli-controlled checkpoints are also located throughout the West Bank, and tens of thousands of Palestinians with work permits, Israeli work permits, cross these checkpoints in their daily commute. And so I stayed with one family in Ramallah, and the daughter was a university student. She was studying in Jerusalem. That should be about a 45-minute drive. But because of the wall, because of the checkpoints, she had to leave home at 4 in the morning to make it for a 9 a.m. class every day. And so she said soldiers would often delay people getting through just because they felt like it, and it was extremely unpredictable. And that's why she had to go really early in the morning just to get to her class. This is a photo of Al Khalil, or the city of Hebron, in the West Bank. And I spent a number of days there in 2008 and in 2009. And as you can see here, there's actually two different sections of the road. And so Palestinians in this city are relegated to the small section of the road to the left, while Israeli settlers can roam freely on the right-hand side. And especially in this city, and in my experience, the level of control and segregation enforced by the Israeli army and settlers was staggering. I volunteered with the community peacemaker teams in Hebron, in Al Khalil, where the reality of the apartheid system is brutally apparent. So this city is divided into sections, with some under complete Israeli military control. On the left-hand side, this is a street in the old city. This is a photo of the fencing that Palestinians had to install to catch the garbage that Israeli settlers would throw on them from the second-story floors that they illegally moved into. And so I spent a lot of time on this street. And when I was walking through the old city, I witnessed a military raid. I took this picture on the right-hand side. When I was there, dozens of soldiers occupied the main street, harassed, intimidated families, and detained a young boy for hours. When I witnessed this, I was so full of rage at the clear injustice. And I remember a Palestinian woman next to me said that this happens almost every single day. So as part of my trip in 2008, I was able to get into Gaza for 24 hours only. This was 1 year after Israel's blockade began in 2007. And this is a photo of me at the Erez crossing, which is controlled by Israel. And so I was traveling with a group of 7 Canadians. There was no one else at the checkpoint. It was completely empty. But we waited about 12 hours to be let through by the military. And in the end, they actually only allowed half of our group through by just randomly choosing passports. And I was lucky enough to be one of them. So even just that experience, it was very clear to me that Israel did not want us to go and see what was happening in Gaza at the time. And so after going through intense security, when I got through this crossing, all I could see for miles and miles were destroyed buildings within what they call the no-go zone. And I remember walking through this dusty path, and we were greeted by 2 young men in a small makeshift stand who offered us tea and welcomed us to Gaza, which perfectly showcased Palestinian hospitality. So I'm going to share a little bit about my experiences in Gaza, but I wanted to give you some context first. Many of you probably already know this, but it's often referred to as the world's largest open-air prison due to Israel's full control of land, air, and sea borders. It's also extremely small. It's shorter than a marathon. It's just 41 kilometers long, 10 kilometers wide, and one of the most densely populated areas in the world. 60% of the population is under 25, and 50% are children. And so this is all before October, but because of Israel's control and economic chokehold, 80% relied on humanitarian aid. And so since I've been there, Israel has carried out 5 large military assaults on Gaza in 2008, a few months after I was there, in 2012, 2014, 2021, and now on a scale never seen before. We have all watched in horror over the past 10 months as the Israeli army has committed massacre after massacre. Israel has bombed churches, mosques, refugee camps, neighborhoods, ambulances, hospitals. These are places that are supposed to be protected under international law and places where families were seeking safety. And the reality is that nowhere is safe in Gaza. So when I was there, I traveled with the Near East Council of Churches, and I visited UN schools, hospitals, and nonprofit organizations. This scarf here, I bought in Gaza City from the Waterloo Society, which is an organization that runs schools and programs for deaf children. And they also run an income generating project for hearing impaired women, where they make and sell these beautiful traditional Palestinian embroidered crafts. Recently, the Waterloo Society has been honored with an award for working tirelessly to meet the needs of and empowering the most marginalized members of society. And in March, it was destroyed. So here, a photo of Israeli soldiers are proudly posing in front of the school after destroying it. Despite this, the society continues its services to displaced families. Their commitment to serving the community with compassion and dignity remains steadfast as they provide food, hearing devices, and children's programming to the millions of displaced families in tents. These are some more photos of my time. I took these photos in Gaza. The picture on the left-hand side with a donkey and a cart was a very common sight that I would see. One of the things that Israel would limit into Gaza and continues to limit is fuel. So many people traveled by these carts instead of cars. And the picture on the right-hand side is St. Philip's Church within the Al-Ali hospital compound. It had been bombed just a few months before I got there by Israel. And at the time, they were raising money to fix it. I also remember spending time with the surgeons and the doctors there, and I witnessed a staggering amount of electricity blackouts that they had to deal with while supporting their patients. In October, the Al-Ali hospital was bombed, and over 500 people were killed as they were seeking shelter. And so this is that same church now. Since then, Israel has conducted more than 1,000 attacks on healthcare facilities in Gaza, targeting every single one of its hospitals. Most have completely run out of medication, anesthesia, and medical supplies, and many are no longer functioning. Hospitals have also been the targets of heinous war crimes. More than 500 bodies have been found in 7 mass graves at hospitals in Gaza, with victims showing signs of torture. And just recently, the World Health Organization has warned that hospitals in Gaza will completely run out of fuel. So what we're seeing today in Gaza and in the West Bank is a continuation of the Nakba, of genocide, and of the dispossession of Palestinians from their land over the last 75 years. And the thing is, Israel is not hiding this fact. Israeli Security Cabinet Minister Avi Dichter said, and I quote, "We are now rolling out the Gaza Nakba 2023. That's how it will end." So this is another map, or a series of maps of the evacuation orders from October to May within the Gaza Strip. And so these repeated evacuation orders have crammed Gaza's 2.2 million people into these humanitarian zones, which now total only 39 square kilometers. So that's just 11% of the Gaza Strip, which was already one of the most densely populated areas in the world. But these safe zones that Israel tells people to flee to have no infrastructure, they have no water, there's no supplies, and they've also been the target of bombs and ground invasions. There is nowhere that is safe. The International Court of Justice ordered Israel to immediately halt its military assault. But despite this ruling, Israel continues to murder families seeking shelter in Gaza. And now, just a few days ago, the Israeli military launched a violent military ground invasion in the occupied West Bank. This is the biggest invasion since 2002. As we speak, they've surrounded hospitals, they've closed off city entrances and destroyed infrastructure like water line supplies to refugee camps, streets, and houses. And so this is yet another manifestation of Israel's colonial violence against the Palestinian people. And meanwhile, Canada continues to be complicit in this violence by providing weapons components and purchasing weapons from Israel. So I opened with a poem by Hiba Abu Nada, a novelist, poet, and educator. She was a beloved figure in the Palestinian literary community. And that poem that I shared at the beginning was the last poem that she wrote before her death on October 20th, when she was killed by an Israeli airstrike on her home in southern Gaza. In her final Facebook post, published on October 8th, she wrote, "Gaza's night is dark, apart from the glow of rockets. Quiet, apart from the sound of bombs. Terrifying, apart from the comfort of prayer. Black, apart from the light of the martyrs. Good night, Gaza." Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for being here and sharing with us, Laura. I can't help but feel incredible amounts of rage and grief. But that's why we're here today. That's why I'm sure a lot of people also on this call feel the same way. But it's good that we're here together and doing this phone zap, because it's the only way to have our voices heard and to be able to put pressure on our officials to do something to end this and to call for a free and liberated Palestine. As of today, Canada is still actively buying weapons from Israel and sending previously approved weapons exports to Israel. So today, our specific ask is we're asking our MPs to sign on to a letter stating that they support an arms embargo now with Israel.
So I'm going to put a couple of links in the chat here for everyone. So you'll see the screenshot on the left here. That's the first link that I've just put in the chat. And that screenshot is our contacts and talking points. So that really provides contact information for local and federal officials. It also provides scripts for leaving phone messages and for sending emails. And you'll see in that document too, when you click on that link, that we've used emojis. We put emojis next to the MPs in the Waterloo region to give you an indication of how supportive or how not supportive they've been. You'll also see I'm going to add this to the chat right here. In that document, there is an email tool